So if you brought a Bible this morning, you can go with me to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, we're going to start in verse 13. And let's just take a moment to pray and invite the Lord just to speak to us this morning. God, we thank you so much for your presence here. God, we acknowledge that you're here. And we open our hearts to you, we focus our attention on you, and we ask that you would speak to us, transform us by the power of the Holy Spirit. As we look at your word together this morning, we invite you to bring encouragement, to bring correction, to bring direction, whatever it is that we need this morning, we just invite you to do it. In Jesus' name, if you agree, say amen. All right. Have you ever been interrupted when you're doing something important? Never? Yeah. No, maybe you're working on homework, and your parents come in and they want you to help with bring groceries inside. Maybe you're gaming. That'd be even worse than working on homework. Maybe you want to be interrupted when you're doing homework. Or you're on the phone and your kids come in, dad. And just, anybody else you hate being interrupted? If you're there with me in Luke chapter 12, I want you to picture this scene. Verse 1 tells us that thousands of people have gathered and Jesus is teaching them. And as Jesus is speaking, Luke 12, verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Okay, this man interrupts Jesus, and clearly this guy could care less about Jesus' sermon or the thousands of other people that are present there. He wants Jesus to stop everything and settle things between he and his brother. And the assumption is that his brother is there present because he demands, "Hey, tell my brother over here to divide the inheritance with me." He's trying to turn this into an episode of Judge Judy or Judge Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting secondhand embarrassment for this guy reading the story. I wonder though how many of us have been like this guy. You ever been so focused on yourself and your problem that you completely lose sight of everybody else around you and what's going on? You ever been there? Be honest. There's nothing more important than your problem. All you can see is that you're broke. All you can see is how that person hurt you. And you bring that problem and you bring your bitterness or your whatever's going on, you bring that with you wherever you go. This guy shows up to this crowd of thousands of people and Jesus is preaching and he brings his problem and impacts the thousands of people present. And oftentimes, God will eventually reveal that what you thought was the problem isn't actually the problem. Verse 14, Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" In other words, I'm not going to be who you're asking me to be for you right now. I do have something to say, but it's not to your brother to make him give you money. Verse 15, then he, Jesus, said to them. Who's he speaking to? He said to them. So picture it. He hears this man's request and he's like, "Hey, y'all hear?" He turns to the crowd. "Y'all hear what this guy wants me to do for him? Now that he brought it up, I actually have something to say to all of you." And he speaks to everybody. It was such a relevant lesson to the crowd that Jesus doesn't say, "Bro, let's just talk after this. Can you just wait till after my sermon?" He actually pivots and he says, "No, actually, this is something so relevant. Everybody needs to hear it." And not only the crowd of thousands, but he made sure that this was recorded in the Bible so that thousands of years later, here at the end of 2024, we can hear this lesson that is incredibly relevant for us today. And this is what Jesus said. Verse 15, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." This morning, we're wrapping up our series of talks called Once Upon a Time. We've been looking every week at a different story that Jesus told. And he would tell these parables, which were these stories that he would use to illustrate a point. So parable, it literally means to cast alongside. So Jesus would cast these parables, these stories, alongside a particular truth to illustrate it and help us understand. And so here, he tells us the truth up front before he tells us the story. And he says, be on your guard. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And then he goes into the story to illustrate it. Verse 16, and he told them this parable. Picture the story. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. What a great problem, right? Imagine you get a promotion that comes with like a massive pay raise. Or your investments take off for like an enormous profit. You're like the first investor in Bitcoin, and now you're like, ooh. Or you get some substantial inheritance from a relative that passed just unexpectedly. Put yourself in this guy's shoes. He's already rich, and then here comes this massive harvest. Now I've got more money than I know what to do with. How many of you would like to have that problem? Usually when I'm like, what am I going to do? It's not because I have too much. It's usually because there's a lack, right? But verse 18, Jesus continues the story. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. If you ever found yourself in a spot where you had more blessings than you could contain, what would you do? This guy immediately thinks early retirement, right? I'm gonna build a bigger barn for all of this grain. It's gonna last me many years, so I'm putting in my 2 weeks. I ain't working anymore. I'm gonna take life easy. I'm gonna eat all the good food. I'm gonna drink all the good drink. I'm just gonna enjoy life. Do you see why Jesus made sure this story made it into the Bible for us today? 2,000 years later, so many of us, we think the same way. I just want to reach the point where I can take life easy. I just want to reach the point where I can finally just relax and eat the good food and drink the good drink and just be merry, just enjoy life. Man, I got a house, but that's kind of like, I would love to have money to have a bigger house. But then you get the bigger house, and then, well, now my goal, like if I could just get an RV so I can live in something when I'm not living in my nice house, and then you get that, and if I could only get my 401k, if I could get my investments to reach a certain point, then I can retire, and then I will have reached my goal. Then I can travel, then I can take life easy, then I can just eat all the stuff that I've been wanting to eat, and I can drink all the stuff I'm wanting to drink, and I can just, it's gonna be good. Surely, there's nothing wrong with that mentality, right? I mean, I worked hard for that money. And I worked a lot of years for that. And so now I'm going to enjoy it. Like, what's wrong with that? God wouldn't fault anybody for enjoying what he's blessed them with, right? Verse 20, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? God calls this guy a fool. That's harsh. This very night your life will be demanded from you. In other words, he's saying your life is going to be over before you know it. And when you die, what's going to happen with all this stuff that you stored up for yourself? Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, I'll paraphrase a little bit. He says that it's meaningless and a great misfortune when you work hard to store up wealth only to die and pass it off to somebody who hasn't worked hard for it. It's a misfortune, a great misfortune. Some old preachers I used to hear growing up, they would say, you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. In other words, you can't bring any of this world's riches with you from this life to the next. Before you know it, your life on this earth and my life on this earth, it will end. And you and I, we came into this world naked and empty-handed, and that's exactly how we're going to leave it. And here's the punchline. This is what Jesus concludes the story with, verse 21. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Here's the point, and this is how I believe God is calling us to respond to this story together this morning. Be rich toward God. Be rich toward God. Tell the person next to you, be rich toward God. Tell the other person, be rich toward God. Come on, I can't hear you. Tell yourself, be rich toward God. Come on. Instead of being greedy for more wealth and possessions to enjoy for yourself, be rich toward God. Instead of living for your pleasure, what would it look like if you decided you were going to live for God's pleasure? Matthew 6, Jesus said, do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moths and vermin, those rats get in there, they destroy it all, where thieves break in and steal. But instead, store up for yourselves treasure where? In heaven. Where moths and there's no rats there. Thank God, I can't wait. Thieves don't break in and steal. You don't need insurance in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I'm not going to preach about money this morning because I don't think that money is Jesus' point. We did do a series on money earlier this year, and so if you're feeling compelled and you want to know what God has to say about money, you can go look it up on YouTube. We spent several weeks looking at all God and His Word has to say about money, but this morning, what I want us to consider is this. Are you rich toward God? Why do you think that God would call this guy a fool? What made him a fool? Like, what was his problem? Do you think that God was upset that he had a huge harvest? Anybody? No. I don't think so. The reason why is because who made him rich? God. It's not a bad thing when your crops produce. To the youth in here this morning, like, it's not a bad thing if you get a bunch of birthday money. Those of you that work, it's not a bad thing when you get a promotion or you get a pay raise. It's not bad when your investments are just skyrocketing. It's not a bad thing if you somehow come across some unexpected money. It's not a bad thing. God's not getting mad at that. God does not call this man a fool because he got rich. The problem is that he wasn't rich toward God. How do we know? How do we know that he wasn't rich toward God? I think we see it when we look at how he planned to use his wealth. So we just read in Matthew 6:21 that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How many of you recognize that your heart follows where you give? So when you think about it, like money is what we exchange, it's what we trade for what we value, right? It's just paper. It's just paper. Yes, there's no like real great inherent value, but the reason why we want it is that in our society, we can exchange it for what we value. You with me? I know this is simple, but when you spend your money, when you spend your time, when you spend your energy, you are making a trade that communicates what you value. The movement of your resources reflects the movement of your heart. Life is all about these trades. Every single day, you are trading your time and your money and your energy for something. You trade your time for money. That's why they pay you by the hour. You exchange time every morning, hopefully, to brush your teeth. Why? Because you value keeping them. Hopefully, right? You exchange time and energy on a Saturday to help a friend move. Why? Because you value that relationship. You know who your real friends are. When they need a truck and you got one. Listen, you all could have gone to the beach this morning. You could be at home hugging your pillow. But you decided to trade your time for worship and the presence of God. Like if you just wanted to be around people, you could have called up some friends. You could have gone to Costco. That place is jammed right now, I bet. Right? But you know that there is only in the presence of God fullness of joy. And so you had to come here. A trade. The big question is, are your trades making you rich toward God? The man in the story, he didn't have money. He had grain, right? But it was trading power. He had now in his possession a lot that he could trade. And by the way he planned to trade it, he communicated that my treasure and what I value is relaxing, eating, drinking, and fun. Again, what's wrong with that? Nothing. If there's no God and no such thing as the resurrection. That's what Paul said. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:52, he said, if the dead are not raised, in other words, if there's no resurrection after this life, and there's no heaven or hell for eternity, then let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. The logic makes sense, right? If there's no God and nothing after this, let's maximize the pleasure that I can experience right now. The reason why this man is a fool is because God indeed does exist. And not only is there life after this, but it's so much longer than life here. I want you to imagine something with me. That this rope represents your life. Okay, it goes on forever. Can you see this orange end right here? Let's just say that this orange tip, this represents your existence here on earth. This is your 70, 80, 90 plus, if you're lucky, years on this earth. And then after, all of the rest of this represents your life after you die. If you could set yourself up for a really great life, either for this portion or for all of the rest, which would you choose? Like if somebody came and said to you, hey, you know what? I really want this part to be great. I don't really care about all of the rest. What would you call that person? A fool. Have you ever traveled to another country where they use different currency? Anybody? I traveled to India, and I exchanged a bunch of my American dollars for the Indian rupees. And I remember coming back home, and I'm looking at all of these bills, and I remember thinking to myself, these were so valuable in India, but like, what am I gonna do with this now? Good luck trying to spend it here, right? Like, it's a currency that's worthless if you take it to Trader Joe's. Like, it's not gonna, here's the point. Don't spend your life acquiring something that has no value when you get to your eternal home. Remember where we started. This man interrupts Jesus. What did he think his need was? I need the money, right? He thought that his need was for Jesus to put material wealth into his hands. Then he would be happy. Then he'd finally be good. But Jesus is saying in this story that even if all the wealth is given to you, but you're not rich toward God, you're like the clown emoji. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be the clown. I don't want to be the fool. And if you're with me, it begs the question, well, then how do we become rich toward God? What does that look like? If this man in the story, if he wanted to be rich toward God, how might he have responded differently? He looks at his barns and they're overflowing with grain. It's spilling out and there's huge piles of grain he doesn't know what to do with. If he treasured God and was wanting to be rich toward God, he might respond like this. God, all of this is yours. God, you made my fields prosper. You blessed me abundantly. Please show me how I can honor you with all of this. God, I don't need a bigger house, bigger barns. I don't need anything else. You've blessed me far beyond anything that I deserve. I just want to honor you with this. God, may my joy be in spending these resources and using all of this to love you and to love other people and point them to you. God, rather than the temporary joy of being able to spend this on myself, God, I want to spend it in a way that shows that I love you. My wife, Katie, is incredibly rich toward me because she continually makes trades for our marriage. She trades Saturday mornings, her one day of the week where she could sleep in, she didn't have to be anywhere, to get up and to go on a coffee date with me. She gives her time and energy. She's like steaming my shirt late on Saturday nights for Sunday morning. She's giving time to pray for me. She's buying me thoughtful gifts instead of spending that stuff elsewhere. She doesn't have a headache after dates. I mean, y'all, you guys listen? You with me? She makes effort to love me the ways that I want to be loved. Our marriage is not perfect, But we experience the riches of deep connection and intimacy and love because we're constantly making trades to become rich toward each other. And the only relationship that I have that's more valuable than my relationship with Katie is my relationship with Jesus. And so if you're looking at the trades in my life, if you look at where the first portion of every paycheck goes, if you look at where the first and best part of my day goes, if you look at where the first and best part of my week is going, my prayer is that those things, that they would show that my relationship with God is way more valuable than anything else. Whether I have a little bit to trade or I have a lot, I want to exchange my time and my money and my energy every day to become rich toward God, to please God, to know Him more, to love Him more. I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up. And I want to just challenge you to consider this morning, what trades are you making? And what trades are you planning right now? When you look ahead to the future, what trades are you planning? This man, he had all this grain. He's planning to trade it for his own pleasure. I'm going to take life easy, eat, drink, be merry. Listen, if you are planning trades like that, I believe that Jesus is extending a warning to you. Don't be a fool. It is so much more beneficial for you to become rich toward God. I'll finish with this. I had a dream a couple months ago I shared with a few of you. And at the end of my dream, I was on this roof of somebody's house. And there was a structure on the roof. It was kind of like a narrow pyramid. And it was pointed straight up, obviously. And this light came shining down from above, like a beam of light. And it hit this structure. And then the structure reflected it to all these different points. It was like the first structure in a chain that was reflecting this light all throughout the area. And in my dream, this structure tipped over and it wasn't in position like a mirror. You move the mirror, it's not in position to reflect that light anymore, and the whole chain is disrupted. And I left the end of my dream finished with this feeling of like, oh no, we gotta point this thing back up. And this is what I believe that it points to part of what God has called me to do as your pastor. That I believe that God is asking me and called me to encourage you and to help you and to help you see how to be able to fully orient your life toward heaven so that you can receive all that God has for you and reflect all that God desires for you to reflect to the world around you. It's a theme that's all throughout the Bible. I just want you to think about how God is trying to get our attention away from how can I just make this little part of my life better? I really want to do this. But I really want to have that. And how can I stop from focusing on this so much to where I can open up my eyes to see there is a possibility for me to trade the same time and money and energy instead of building something here that's temporary, where moths and rust destroy, thieves break in and steal, and I can put it somewhere where it will not be, no one can rob it, nobody can touch it, it is safe and secure for me in heaven. I don't know what those rewards are going to look like, but I know that they're way better than anything that I could store up here. What does it look like for you to orient yourself toward God? Colossians says, set your hearts on things above. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Pray continually. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. Seek God with all of your heart and you'll find Him. First commandment, love God with all that you've got. Store up treasure in heaven, not on earth. And so what does it look like for you this morning to orient your life toward heaven? Where are you making trades that are only going to benefit you for this life? Let's be a people that make trades this week, today, that'll make us rich toward God. Amen?